What if you received voicemails from your best friend, but no one, not audio experts, not the police, not even her own family, could understand what she was trying to say? What if those messages were her last communication before disappearing forever? Have you ever stopped to think about what you would do if the person you love most left behind words that exist that you can listen to as many times as you want, but that simply don't make sense? How would you deal with the frustration of knowing that the answer to what happened is there recorded, but completely inaccessible? This isn't a hypothetical situation created to scare you. It really happened. And the case I'm going to tell you about today is one of the most disturbing and enigmatic disappearances in recent years, precisely because it involves something that should bring clarity but instead only deepens the mystery. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you and make you question everything you thought you knew about communication, hidden messages, and unexplained disappearances. Sara Miller was 23 years old when she disappeared. She was a college student, a young woman with a completely normal life, full of friends, plans of future, and dreams like anyone her age. There was nothing extraordinary in Sara's life that would indicate something so bizarre was about to happen. She wasn't involved in dangerous activities, had no known enemies, and didn't live a life of risk. She was simply a girl trying to navigate adulthood, balancing studies, work, and relationships like millions of young people do every day. But on a seemingly ordinary day, Sara disappeared. And the only thing she left behind were voicemails. Several voicemails sent to close friends and family in the hours before her disappearance. And here's where the story becomes truly haunting. No one could understand what she was saying in these messages. It's not that the audio is bad or that there's too much background noise. The messages are perfectly audible. You can hear Sara's voice clearly, but the words coming out of her mouth make no sense. It's as if she's speaking in a made-up language or using some kind of code no one can decipher. Have you ever been there? Have you ever received a message from someone that seemed completely out of context, that made no sense at all? Now multiply that confusion by 1,000, and imagine that this incomprehensible message is the last thing you have from someone who disappeared without a trace. Imagine the frustration, the despair, the feeling that the answer is there, so close, yet completely out of your reach. Sara's parents listened to these messages dozens, perhaps hundreds of times. They brought in audio forensics experts, linguists, even people who work with cryptography and secret codes. Everyone tried to find a pattern, a hidden meaning, some clue as to what Sara was trying to communicate. But nothing, absolutely nothing made sense. It was as if Sara were speaking random words, disjointed sentences that led nowhere. And most disturbing of all, Sara's voice in these messages sounded strange. It wasn't exactly fear, not pure panic like you'd expect if someone were in immediate danger. It was something different. Some who heard the messages describe it as profound confusion, as if Sara wasn't sure where she was or what was happening. Others say there's an almost robotic quality to the way she speaks, as if she's reading from a script she doesn't understand. And some swear they can hear urgency in her words, even without understanding their meaning. What makes this case even more intriguing is that Sara was a perfectly articulate person before this. She had no history of speech problems, no medical conditions that could explain this sudden change in communication. She was a communication student, someone who always expressed ideas clearly, and suddenly, in the last hours before her disappearance, she left messages that defy any attempt to understand. Police initially treated the case as a possible psychotic break. Perhaps Sara was experiencing some kind of mental crisis that affected her ability to communicate coherently. But the family vehemently rejected this theory. They insisted that Sara had been perfectly fine in the previous days, that there were no signs of mental deterioration, that she was happy and focused on her studies. So what had changed so drastically in a matter of hours? Some investigators have raised the possibility that the messages were intentionally coded, that Sara was trying to convey important information in a way that only certain people would understand, or in a way that would protect herself or others from some threat. But if it was a code, it was so complex that no one has been able to break it to this day. And if Sara created this code, why didn't she leave any clues about how to decipher it? The messages exist. They are there, preserved, and can be heard, analyzed, and studied, but they remain an absolute enigma. And while these incomprehensible words echo in the void, Sara Miller remains missing, and no one knows what happened to her. And that's where the story really begins. When the first messages arrived, Sara's friends thought it was some kind of strange prank, perhaps a game or an elaborate prank. But as more messages arrived, and as Sara stopped responding to their attempts to contact her, concern began to grow. A close friend, Jessica, was one of the first to receive the messages. She listened to the audio over and over, tried to figure out if Sara was speaking in code, if she was quoting something from a movie or book they knew, if there was some internal reference only they would understand. But there was none. It was just words that didn't connect, sentences that began and ended without any apparent logic. And look, before I continue with this story that only gets more intriguing, I need to tell you something. If you're here watching so far, it's probably because cases like this fascinate you as much as they fascinate me. And if this kind of content resonates with you, if you want to continue uncovering real mysteries, unexplained disappearances, and stories that make you think, I invite you to join this community. Subscribe to the channel. Because every day there's a new real case here. Treat it with the depth and respect these stories deserve. And leave a comment below of what's impacted you most so far. Have you ever received a strange message from someone who later disappeared or completely changed? Or do you think Sara's messages were intentional code or a sign of something much more disturbing? I read every comment, and this exchange with you is what makes this space special. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who also care about these cases, who also want to understand what happens when someone simply disappears without explanation. And if you're enjoying the content, please give the video a like. It may seem small, but it makes a huge difference in helping more people learn the story of Sara Miller and so many others who disappeared, leaving behind only mysteries. It's what keeps this work alive and allows me to continue investigating and bringing these stories to you. Now, back to Sara's case. The family was notified about the strange messages and immediately knew something was very wrong. And what happened in the following hours only made everything even more confusing and frightening. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. Because to truly understand the magnitude of what happened to Sara Miller, we first need to understand who she was before that day. And that's precisely where this case becomes even more disturbing. Because Sara wasn't someone living on the margins of society. She wasn't someone with a history of erratic behavior or serious psychological problems. She was, by every possible definition, a completely normal young woman. And perhaps that's precisely what makes the incomprehensible messages so frightening. Because if it can happen to someone like Sara, it can happen to any of us. Sara was 23 years old when she disappeared. She was a communications student at the State University. In her penultimate year, she had excellent grades, was dedicated to her studies, actively participated in academic projects, and had a solid reputation among professors and peers. She wasn't a student who went unnoticed or who was simply following university protocol. Sara genuinely cared about what she studied, had clear plans for the future, and demonstrated the mindset of someone who knew exactly where she wanted to go in life. Her social life was equally healthy and balanced. Sara had a close group of friends since high school, Jessica, Amanda, and Claire, with whom she kept in constant contact. They met regularly, shared experiences, and supported each other through the typical difficulties of transitioning into adulthood. It wasn't one of those superficial groups based solely on outings and parties. There was a genuine connection there, the kind of friendship you build over years of mutual trust and shared experiences. Beyond her inner circle, Sara had a wider social network at university. She was known for being approachable, friendly, and someone who had no difficulty making new connections. She participated in study groups, attended campus events, and had a natural ability to make people feel comfortable around her. Professors who knew her described Sara as an articulate, intelligent, and emotionally balanced young woman. There were no signs of social isolation, severe depression, or any of the common markers that sometimes precede serious psychological crises. Sara's family life was also stable. She came from a middle-class family with supportive parents and a younger sister named Emily, 17. Her relationship with her parents, Michael and Patricia Miller, was described as healthy and loving, with the normal ups and downs that exist in any family dynamic, but nothing that indicated serious problems. Sara lived in a shared apartment near the university with 2 roommates, but visited her family regularly, usually on weekends. Patricia, the mother, mentions in later interviews that Sara was particularly excited in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She had just been accepted into a competitive internship program at a local advertising agency, something she had been pursuing for months. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that aligned with her career plans, and she was excited about the possibility of gaining practical experience in her field of study. There were no signs of excessive stress, debilitating anxiety, or any indication that she was struggling with anything heavy enough to cause a dramatic transformation in her mental state. The impact of this normalcy cannot be underestimated. When you look behind the scenes of Sara's life in the weeks and months before her disappearance, you won't find the typical clues that sometimes explain bizarre behavior or sudden crises. She hadn't started using drugs, hadn't been involved in abusive or toxic relationships, and hadn't experienced significant recent trauma. Her routine was consistent. Classes during the week, part-time work at a local coffee shop, studying at night, social activities on the weekends. It was a structured, predictable, healthy life. Sara also maintained an active social media presence, like most people her age. Her posts portrayed a young woman engaged in life, sharing moments with friends, photos of books she was reading, and thoughts about academic projects. Digital behavior experts who later analyzed her online activity found no worrying patterns. There were no dark posts, no hints about being in danger, or sudden changes in the type of content she shared. Everything seemed normal until the day it stopped. From a mental health perspective, Sara had no prior diagnoses of serious psychiatric conditions. She had never been hospitalized for mental health issues, was not taking psychiatric medication, and according to those close to her, had never shown symptoms of psychosis, schizophrenia, or dissociative disorders. She had, like most college students, occasional episodes of anxiety related to exams and deadlines, but nothing out of the ordinary or that suggested particular vulnerability to severe mental health crises. Sara's friends, when interviewed by police, repeatedly emphasized that she was completely normal in the days immediately preceding her disappearance. Jessica mentions that they had lunch together 2 days earlier, and Sara was talking excitedly about her new internship, making summer plans, and showing genuine enthusiasm for life. Amanda reports exchanging text messages with Sara the morning of her disappearance, and the conversation was completely mundane. Comments about a class, an inside joke about a teacher, nothing that indicated any kind of disturbance. The hidden truth here is that the more you learn about Sara, the more incomprehensible what happened becomes. There was no obvious narrative of mental deterioration, no clear sign that something was wrong, no period of gradual behavioral change that often precedes serious crises. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. One moment, Sara Miller was an articulate, well-balanced college student. The next, she was leaving voicemails that no one could decipher, and then disappearing completely. This abrupt transformation is what makes the case so disconcerting. If Sara had a history of mental health issues, if there had been progressive signs that something was wrong, there would at least be a narrative framework to try to understand what happened. But there wasn't. It was as if the person everyone knew had been replaced by someone completely different in a matter of hours, without explanation, without warning, without any preparation. And it's this normality that haunts the people who knew her. Because if it can happen to Sara so unexpectedly, so completely outside her normal life, then the illusion of security and predictability we all maintain about our own lives is questioned. The comfortable mindset that these things don't happen to people like us is shattered when you realize that Sara was exactly a person like us, and yet something inexplicable happened. Sara's university professors, particularly her academic advisor, Dr. Linda Chun, expressed complete shock when they learned of her disappearance. Dr. Chun had met with Sara just a week earlier to discuss her senior project. She described Sara as focused, articulate, demonstrating a clear understanding of the material and the ability to express complex ideas clearly. There was absolutely nothing to suggest she was experiencing any kind of crisis, Dr. Chun stated in later interviews. She was one of my most promising students. The revelation that someone so seemingly stable and articulate could leave completely incomprehensible messages and then disappear without a trace creates a particular kind of anxiety. It's not just about the mystery of what happened to Sara specifically. It's about the fragility of our understanding of reality, about how decisions or events can transform a completely normal life into an incomprehensible tragedy in a matter of hours. Comment there. She was like any one of us. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the day Sara Miller disappeared began so completely normal that no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted what was about to happen. And it's precisely this normality that makes it all so disturbing. Because when you look at the chronology of that day, at every decision Sara made, every interaction she had, you find no warning signs. There's no cinematic moment where everything visibly changes. It's just an ordinary day that suddenly stops being so. It was Tuesday, March 22nd. Sara woke up at her usual time, around 7 in the morning, in the apartment she shared with 2 college roommates, Rachel and Olivia. Rachel reports running into Sara in the kitchen that morning while they were making coffee. They chatted briefly about a test they had the following week, laughed about something that had happened at a party the previous weekend. It was a kind of mundane interaction that happens between people who live together, nothing memorable, nothing that would stick in their minds as the last normal conversation they would have. Sara left the house around 8:15 a.m. Olivia was in the shower at the time and didn't even see her leave. This seemingly insignificant detail would later become a source of guilt for Olivia. If only I had gotten out of the shower earlier. If only I had said goodbye to her. If only I had noticed something different, she said in later interviews, though everyone around her insisted there was nothing she could have noticed or done differently. Sara's first class was at 9 in the morning, communication theory, one of her core courses. She arrived a few minutes early, as was her custom. Classmates sitting near her mentioned that Sara seemed completely normal. She had done the pre-reading and participated in the class discussion with her usual articulate and intelligent observations. The professor noticed absolutely nothing unusual in her behavior. It was just another class, another day in Sara's academic journey. After class, around 10:30, Sara went to the campus library. Access records show that she swiped her student ID at the electronic gate at 10:37 in the morning. Security cameras captured her entering, walking toward the periodicals section, and sitting at one of the study tables. She stayed there for about an hour, working on her laptop, occasionally checking out books. Nothing unusual about this behavior. Sara often used her free mornings between classes to study in the library. The impact of reviewing the security camera footage later was significant for the investigation, because there was Sara, captured from multiple angles, looking completely normal, focused on her studies, occasionally checking her phone like any student does. There were no signs of agitation, no erratic behavior, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. She was simply being Sara, doing what she always did. Around noon, Sara met her friend Amanda for lunch at the campus cafeteria. They had arranged to meet a few days earlier. Amanda reports that they ate lunch together for about 40 minutes, chatting about completely trivial things. Sara mentioned she was excited about the new internship she was starting in a few weeks, talked about a book she was reading, and laughed at an anecdote Amanda told about her brother. She was exactly as she always was, Amanda told police, smiling, engaged in the conversation, completely present. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that made me think anything was wrong. This revelation of absolute normality is crucial to understanding the mystery, because up until this point in the day, until approximately 12:40 in the afternoon, when Sara said goodbye to Amanda, there was no indication that anything out of the ordinary was happening or about to happen. The transformation that was coming had not yet given any visible sign. After lunch, Sara had a 2 o'clock class, Communication Research Methods. She arrived on time, sat in her usual seat, and, according to reports from her classmates, participated normally for the first 40 minutes. The professor, Dr. James Morrison, would later mention that he asked a specific question about qualitative methodology, and Sara gave a detailed and accurate answer, demonstrating a clear understanding of the material. This was around 2:20 in the afternoon, but then something changed, and that's when the normalcy of the day began to crack. Around 2:30, a classmate sitting next to Sara noticed that she had stopped taking notes and was staring at her phone with an expression the classmate described as confused or worried. When the classmate asked if everything was okay, Sara simply nodded but didn't respond verbally. A few minutes later, Sara excused herself from the professor, gathered her things, and left the classroom. Dr. Morrison reports that he found it strange because Sara had never left in the middle of class before, but assumed she was feeling ill or had an emergency. Sara didn't return to class. And from that point on, around 2:40 p.m., the timeline becomes much more difficult to accurately trace. What we know comes mainly from security cameras scattered around campus and a few witnesses who briefly saw her. The cameras show Sara leaving the building where she had class and walking quickly toward the parking lot. Her body language in these images appears different than in the morning recordings. She's walking faster, constantly checking her phone, and appears less relaxed, more tense. One witness, a campus security guard named Robert Hayes, mentioned seeing Sara in the parking lot around 3 p.m. He was making his usual rounds and noticed her sitting in her car, appearing to be talking on the phone or recording something on her cell phone. He didn't think it was particularly suspicious at the time, just another student running errands in her car. But this memory would later prove crucial, because it was likely at this point that Sara was recording the garbled voicemails. The decision Sara made in that moment, sitting alone in the car, recording messages no one could understand, are the heart of the mystery. What was going through her head? What had changed so drastically between that normal morning and that afternoon? Was there something on her phone that disturbed her? Had she received a threatening call? Had she discovered some disturbing information? Or was something happening internally? Some neurological or psychological change that transformed her from an articulate student into someone unable to communicate clearly? Around 3:30 p.m., Sara sent her first voicemails. They went to Jessica, Amanda, and Claire, her closest friends, almost simultaneously. She also sent messages to her mother. None of them could immediately understand what Sara was saying, but they all noticed something was very wrong. Jessica tried calling back immediately, but Sara didn't answer. Amanda sent multiple text messages asking if everything was okay, but received no coherent response. The last time Sara was definitively seen was around 4 in the afternoon, when security cameras at the campus parking lot exit captured her driving her car, a blue Honda Civic, out of the university. The direction she took would have taken her toward downtown, but after that, the trail goes cold. There's no more security camera footage, no confirmed witnesses, no credit card transactions, no cell phone pings after 5:15 that afternoon. The behind-the-scenes footage from that afternoon reveals a series of frantic attempts to contact her. Sara's friends grew increasingly worried, calling each other, trying to find out if anyone had reached her. Around 6 o'clock, Jessica called Sara's parents to inform them of the strange messages. That's when Michael and Patricia Miller first heard the incomprehensible recordings and knew something was terribly wrong. The mindset that dominated everyone in those first hours was one of confusion mixed with growing panic. No one knew exactly what to do because the situation was so unusual. So outside of any known pattern, Sara hadn't simply disappeared silently. She had left messages, had tried to communicate, but in a way no one could process or understand. Right there, the day that changed everything. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the voice messages Sara left are the centerpiece of this entire mystery. And the more you try to understand them, the more disturbing they become. These recordings are the only window we have into Sara's mental state in those final hours before her disappearance. But it's a window shrouded in such dense fog that no one can see through it clearly. And most frustrating of all, these messages exist. They can be listened to, analyzed, and studied endlessly, but they remain an absolute enigma. The first message was sent at 3:32 p.m., according to the timestamps. Jessica was the one who received this first recording. She was leaving class when her phone vibrated with a voicemail notification from Sara. Initially, she thought nothing of it. Friends sent each other voicemails all the time. But when Jessica put the phone to her ear and pressed play, what she heard left her completely confused and then increasingly alarmed. The voice was definitely Sara's. There was no doubt about it. The audio quality was clear. There was no significant interference. It wasn't a bad connection or a corrupted file. But the words coming out of Sara's mouth made no sense. Jessica listened to the message 3 times in a row right there in the university hallway, desperately trying to understand what her friend was saying. She later described it as like listening to someone speaking a language that sounds vaguely familiar, but you can't really understand. The emotional impact of hearing that first message was profound. Jessica knew it was Sara speaking, recognized the voice, the intonation patterns, even certain vocal tics that were characteristic of her friend. But it was as if Sara had been disconnected from coherent language. There were occasional recognizable words, fragments that sounded like English, but they didn't connect logically. It was like listening to someone shuffling random words from a dictionary and trying to form sentences with them. Sara's transformation from someone extremely articulate, a communication student who constantly expressed ideas clearly, to someone producing this kind of incoherent speech was shocking. And this wasn't just one message. Over the next 40 minutes, Sara sent at least 7 different voice messages to various people. Each was approximately 30 seconds to 2 minutes long, and all were equally incomprehensible. When experts later analyzed the recordings, they noticed some interesting patterns. Sara's tone of voice varied between messages. In some, she sounded almost mechanical, as if she were reading something emotionless, simply mouthing words with no emotional connection to them. Other messages had a more urgent tone, as if she were trying to communicate something important but couldn't find the right words. And in at least 2 of the recordings, there was what some described as a quality of profound confusion in her voice, as if she didn't understand what she was saying. The hidden truth that emerges from analyzing these messages is that there is no consensus among experts about what exactly is happening in them. Linguists who studied the recordings identified what appeared to be English words, but arranged in orders that completely violate the rules of syntax and grammar. It's not just a matter of Sara using the wrong words or switching terms. It's more fundamental than that. The very structure of language seems to have collapsed. An example that was shared publicly with the family's permission. In one of the messages, Sara appears to say something like "blue window always running inside number 777. The words are clear and pronounced correctly, but there is no discernible meaning in the sequence. Some have speculated that it could be code, that blue window could be a reference to something, that the repetition of the number 7 could have meaning. But no interpretation has produced a coherent explanation that applies to all the messages. Cryptography experts were consulted by the family and the police. The possibility that Sara was using some kind of cipher or code was tempting, because it at least offered an explanation that didn't involve a complete mental breakdown. But if it was a code, it was unlike any known system. Cryptographers tried substitution, transposition, and word frequency analysis techniques, but nothing revealed any significant patterns. There were also strange sounds in the background of some messages. In two of them specifically, you can hear what sound like traffic, as if Sara were near a busy street. But there are also moments where you hear something that sounds like rhythmic, almost metallic beats, which no one's been able to definitively identify. Some think it's just Sara tapping the steering wheel while recording. Others think it could be something in her surroundings. The journey to decipher these messages took hundreds of hours of specialized work. The family hired independent consultants. The police involved their own experts, and even online volunteers dedicated significant time trying to find patterns or hidden meanings. Entire online forums were created to discuss Sara's messages. People with expertise in linguistics, psychology, cryptography, and even computer programming offered their analyses. Some theorized that Sara might be speaking in word salad, a psychiatric term describing severely disorganized speech seen in certain mental disorders, particularly schizophrenia. In this condition, the person uses real words but in a way that doesn't convey meaning because the logical connections between words are broken. But this explanation had problems. Sara had no history of severe mental illness, and word salad usually develops gradually as part of a deterioration process, not suddenly appearing in someone who was perfectly articulate hours before. Others suggested aphasia, a neurological condition where the ability to process and produce language is impaired, usually due to stroke or brain injury. But again, aphasia usually has a sudden onset associated with a clear neurological event, and there was no evidence that Sara had suffered a head injury or cerebrovascular event. Furthermore, the speech patterns in the messages did not perfectly match known forms of aphasia. The most disturbing revelation came from audio forensic experts who analyzed not only the content of the messages, but also the acoustic characteristics of Sara's voice. They noted that in some of the recordings, there were micropauses and variations in speech rate that were inconsistent with Sara's normal patterns. It was as if she were struggling to form words, or perhaps even reading something she herself didn't understand. There were moments in the messages where Sara seemed to start a sentence coherently, only to fall apart midway through. For example, in one recording, she appears to begin by saying, "I need," but then the rest of the sentence is completely incomprehensible. These false starts suggested that perhaps part of Sara's brain was still trying to communicate normally, but something was blocking or distorting the output. The family's decisions about whether or not to share these messages publicly were agonizing. On the one hand, the more people who heard them, the greater the chance someone would recognize a pattern or gain insight that others missed. On the other hand, these were Sara's last words, intimate recordings of someone clearly in pain, and exposing them to public scrutiny felt like a violation. Eventually, fragments were released, always with the hope that someone, somewhere, might hold the key to deciphering them. But to this day, more than a year after her disappearance, no one has been able to produce a definitive interpretation of the messages that is accepted by all the experts involved. Sara Miller's voicemails remain one of the most frustrating and enigmatic aspects of the entire case. They are concrete evidence that something was terribly wrong, but they don't reveal what that something was or what happened to Sara afterward. Comment there, "I need to hear these messages." Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because amidst all those incomprehensible messages, amidst that sea of jumbled words and meaningless phrases, there was one sentence that stood out absolutely clearly. And that sentence completely changed the direction of the investigation and the theories about what was happening to Sara in those final hours. 3 simple words that she spoke with crystal clarity, without ambiguity, without confusion. They are listening. The revelation of this phrase came when Amanda was listening to one of Sara's messages for the 10th or 12th time. She had already given up trying to understand the rest, just listening repeatedly in the hope of catching something, anything that made sense. And then, amid a particularly confusing sequence of disjointed words, Amanda heard with absolute clarity, "They are listening." The phrase was there, perfectly articulated, amid the linguistic chaos. It was like finding an island of lucidity in an ocean of confusion. Amanda immediately shared this discovery with her other friends and Sara's family. Everyone listened to the messages again with renewed attention, focusing specifically on that phrase. And it was there, undeniable. In one of the recordings, Sara uttered those 3 words with a clarity that contrasted sharply with everything else she was saying. Her tone when she said it was also different. There was urgency there. There was warning. There was something that sounded genuinely like fear. The impact of this discovery was immense because, for the first time, there was something concrete to work with. It wasn't interpretation. It wasn't speculation about what Sara might have been trying to say. It was a clear statement. But what did it mean? Who were they? And what were they listening to? Or more importantly, why did Sara think they were listening? This statement opened up a whole new range of possibilities about what might have happened to her. The first theory that naturally emerged was actual surveillance. Had Sara discovered she was being watched? Was someone monitoring her communications, tracking her movements, invading her privacy in some way? This possibility led investigators to examine every electronic device Sara could access. Her laptop, her tablet, even her cell phone after it was eventually found. Digital forensics experts combed every file, every application, every communication record, looking for evidence of spyware, malware, or any type of surveillance software. But they found nothing. Sara's devices were clean. There were no suspicious apps installed, no signs of anyone having remote access to her devices, no evidence that she was being digitally tracked. Of course, this didn't completely rule out the possibility of physical surveillance, such as someone physically following or observing her, but the phrase "they're listening" specifically suggested concern about electronic surveillance or eavesdropping. The quest to understand this sentence led investigators to explore every aspect of Sara's life, searching for reasons why someone would want to monitor her. Did she have information that someone didn't want released? Had she witnessed something she shouldn't have? Was she involved in a situation where surveillance would be a legitimate concern? But each line of inquiry led to dead ends. Sara was an ordinary college student. She wasn't involved in controversial political activism, didn't work with sensitive information, and didn't have connections to organizations typically targeted for surveillance. But there's another possible interpretation of this phrase that's much darker: paranoia. The mindset of someone experiencing certain types of psychological crises, particularly psychotic episodes, often includes delusions of persecution. The feeling of being watched, monitored, followed is one of the most common symptoms of paranoid psychosis. If Sara was experiencing some kind of mental breakdown, the belief that they are listening could be a manifestation of paranoia, not a reflection of a real threat. This theory would explain both the clear sentence and the rest of the incomprehensible messages. Perhaps Sara was trying to communicate in a coded way because she genuinely believed her communications were being monitored, and the confusing messages were her attempt to convey information without them understanding. This would align with certain types of paranoid thinking, where a person develops complex communication systems that only make sense to them based on connections they perceive but that don't objectively exist. But Sara's family vehemently rejects this interpretation. They insist that Sara has never shown signs of paranoia before, never mentioned feeling watched or persecuted, never expressed concerns about surveillance. For this theory to make sense, there would have to have been an instantaneous and dramatic psychological transformation, a sudden mental breakdown with no warning signs. And while this is technically possible, it is extremely rare. Sara's decisions in that moment, choosing to specifically express this concern about being heard, suggests she was at least trying to communicate a perceived threat. If it were just random word salad, it would be statistically unlikely she would have formed such a coherent and relevant sentence by chance. The sentence makes sense syntactically and semantically, which suggests intentionality behind it. Some investigators have considered the possibility that Sara was trying to warn someone, that she had discovered something dangerous and was trying to alert friends or family, but had to do so in a way that was sufficiently obscure to not alert anyone listening. In this interpretation, the mixed messages were not the result of an inability to communicate, but rather a deliberate choice to obscure the message. "They are listening" would be the central warning, and the rest would be a layer of protection, making the messages sound like the product of mental breakdown rather than intentional revelations. But this theory has its own problems. If Sara was trying to pass on coded information, why didn't she leave any clues about how to decode it? Why wasn't there a comprehensible system that those close to her could decipher? And most importantly, what had she discovered that would justify this level of elaborate precaution? The underlying truth may be that "they are listening" was genuinely the only thing Sara could articulate clearly amidst whatever process was affecting her ability to communicate. It was perhaps the most pressing concern on her mind at that moment, so important that it broke through any barriers preventing her from speaking normally. In this scenario, we don't know whether the concern was justified or a product of paranoia, but we do know that it was central to Sara's experience at that moment. The background to the investigation reveals that the police took this statement very seriously. They investigated whether Sara had been a victim of stalking, whether any ex-boyfriends or acquaintances exhibited obsessive behavior, and whether anyone in her life might have reason to monitor her. They spoke with co-workers at the coffee shop where she worked part-time, classmates, and teachers, looking for any indication of problematic relationship or anyone with inappropriate interest in Sara. They also examined her social media accounts for signs of online harassment, disturbing messages from strangers, and any interactions that might suggest someone was paying inappropriate attention to Sara. But they found nothing significant. There was a usual level of online interaction that any 23-year-old has, but nothing that stood out as threatening or obsessive. The phrase "they're listening" also raised questions about who they were. The use of the plural is interesting. Sara didn't say "he is listening" or "she is listening." She used "they," implying multiple people. This suggests organization, coordination, perhaps even conspiracy. It's the kind of language someone would use if they were concerned about institutional or group surveillance, not just an individual. But again, there was no context in Sara's life that explained why she would be targeted by this kind of organized surveillance. She wasn't investigating crimes. She wasn't a journalist working on a breaking story. She didn't have access to sensitive corporate or government information. She was a communications student who worked part-time at a coffee shop. What could have put her on the radar of them? Whoever they were, right there. Who was listening? Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter. Because when the official investigation began, when police mobilized resources to try to find Sara and understand what had happened to her, each discovery they made brought no clarity. Instead, each clue, each piece of evidence, each testimony only added more layers to the mystery. And what should have been a relatively straightforward missing person case quickly turned into one of the most perplexing puzzles investigators had ever faced. The first line of investigation was tracking Sara's cell phone. In modern disappearance cases, the cell phone is often the most valuable tool in establishing someone's location and final movements. Cell phone carriers can track which cell towers picked up the device's signal, creating a map of the person's movements. And initially, this worked exactly as expected. Records showed that Sara's cell phone left the university campus around 4 p.m., moving toward the city center. But then, at 5:15 that afternoon, something strange happened. Sara's phone simply stopped emitting a signal. It wasn't a gradual shutdown like when a battery dies. It was instantaneous. One moment the phone was active, connected to the network, pinging cell towers. The next, nothing. Complete digital silence. The impact of this discovery was significant because there were several possible explanations, none of them comforting. The simplest possibility was that Sara had intentionally turned off her phone. But why? If she was in danger, keeping her phone on would be crucial to calling for help or being tracked. If she was running away voluntarily, turning off her phone would make sense to avoid being found. But this contradicted everything they knew about Sara and the circumstances. Another possibility was that someone had turned off her phone or even removed the battery, which would suggest a kidnapping or violent confrontation. There was also the technical possibility that something had damaged the phone. A car accident, for example, could have destroyed the device. But when Sara's cell phone was eventually found 3 days after her disappearance, this theory was ruled out. The phone was discovered in a public trash can approximately 3 miles from the city center. It was intact with no apparent physical damage. When investigators were able to access it, the device turned on normally. There was nothing mechanically wrong with it. The hidden truth about where and how the phone was found raised even more questions. Why would Sara or anyone put the phone in a trash can? If she was trying to avoid being traced, why not simply throw it in a river or destroy it completely? Leaving it in a public trash can seem almost casual, like disposing of regular trash. It didn't seem like the action of someone in panic or someone carefully trying to hide evidence. Meanwhile, investigators were reviewing security cameras from around the area where Sara had been that afternoon. And here's where things get even stranger. Multiple cameras capture Sara in the minutes and hours after she left campus. A convenience store camera shows her walking down the sidewalk around 4:30. Her body language in these images is noticeably different from the campus footage from that morning. Sara isn't walking with the relaxed pace of someone just getting from one place to another. She's moving quickly, almost running at times. She glances back repeatedly, as if checking to see if she's being followed. Her hands are constantly moving, sometimes in her hair, sometimes holding her phone, clearly showing agitation. But here's the crucial detail. In all the images, Sara is completely alone. There's no one obviously following her, no other people nearby who seem to be paying attention to her. The transformation in Sara's behavior between morning and afternoon is both visible and disturbing. In the morning, cameras showed a relaxed young woman moving normally around campus. In the afternoon, these images show someone clearly distressed, nervous, constantly looking around as if expecting a threat. But if there was a threat, it wasn't visible on camera. This raises a possibility that the threat was internal, a product of Sara's own mind, or that whoever was causing her fear was careful enough not to appear on camera. The background to the investigation reveals that several witnesses saw Sara that afternoon and were interviewed by police. A bookstore employee mentioned that Sara entered the store around 4:45 but didn't buy anything. He remembers her because Sara was acting strangely, walking quickly through the aisles, picking up books and putting them back without really looking at them, as if she were using the store as a hiding place or trying to kill time. When the employee asked if she needed help, Sara apparently looked at him with an expression he described as confused and scared. She mumbled something he couldn't understand and then quickly left the store. This testimony is consistent with someone in an altered state of consciousness, whether due to a mental health crisis, substance use, or extreme psychological stress. Another witness, a woman at a bus stop, reported seeing Sara sitting on a nearby park bench around 5 p.m. The woman noticed Sara because she was talking to herself or talking very intensely on her cell phone. The witness couldn't hear what Sara was saying, but the description matches a time when Sara was likely recording the incomprehensible voice messages. The decisions Sara made during those final hours paint the picture of someone in growing turmoil. She didn't go home. She didn't go to the apartment she shared with her roommates. She didn't try to return to university or seek help from friends or authorities. Instead, she wandered the city center, popping in and out of businesses, sitting in public places, recording those mysterious messages. It was as if she were on some kind of mission that only made sense to her, or as if she were trying to avoid something or someone. The last confirmed image of Sara comes from a security camera in a public parking lot at 5:10 p.m. She is seen walking toward a less well-lit area of the lot. After that, nothing. There are no more visual records of her, no more cell phone pings, no confirmed witnesses. Sara simply disappears from the visible record at that moment. The investigators' quest to piece together what happened after 5:10 included interviewing literally hundreds of people. Anyone who was in the area that day, any drivers who might have passed by, anyone who worked at nearby establishments. There were a few alleged sightings in the following days, people who thought they saw Sara in different parts of the city, but none were definitively confirmed. Many were cases of mistaken identity, with people seeing young people with similar appearances and thinking it was Sara. Sara's car, a blue Honda Civic, was found a week after her disappearance, parked on a residential street about 2 miles from where she was last seen on surveillance cameras. The vehicle was locked, the keys were missing, and there were no signs of a struggle or violence inside. There were a few of her personal belongings in the car, a backpack with books and study materials, a half-empty bottle of water, and a coat. But there was no cell phone, no wallet, and no indication of where Sara had gone after parking there. Forensic analysis of the car revealed nothing significant. There was no blood, no signs of anyone else having been in the vehicle, no evidence of foul play. It was as if Sara had simply parked there, grabbed a few things, and walked away. But where to and why? The location where the car was found held no known special significance in Sara's life. It wasn't near anyone she knew, nor was it near any place she frequented. The researchers' mindset shifted over the first few weeks as more information was gathered, but no clear explanation emerged. Initially, there was hope that it was a relatively straightforward case. Sara had had some sort of crisis, had wandered off, but would soon be found. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of her, no use of credit cards, no contact with family or friends, no indication that she was alive anywhere, the investigation took a darker tone. The most frustrating revelation is that, despite all the cameras, all the testimonies, all the digital tracking, there comes a point where Sara simply disappears from the observable record. It's as if she's entered a dead zone where no technology can reach, where no witnesses are looking. And in that dead zone, whatever happened to Sara Miller remains an absolute mystery. Right there, she disappeared out of nowhere. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because after analyzing all the evidence, all the testimonies, and all the clues that lead nowhere, we reached a point where we need to confront the theories about what really happened to Sara Miller. And the truth is, there are multiple possible explanations, each with elements that make sense, but also with gaps that cannot be easily filled. What I will do now is present these theories honestly and balancedly, because none of them have been proven and perhaps never will be. The first theory, and perhaps the most obvious given the circumstances, is that Sara suffered some kind of sudden psychological crisis or psychotic break. The incomprehensible messages, the erratic behavior captured on camera, the increasing agitation throughout the afternoon. All of this could be consistent with someone experiencing an episode of acute psychosis. In conditions like recent onset schizophrenia or bipolar disorder with psychotic features, it's possible that someone who seemed completely normal could suddenly begin experiencing hallucinations, delusions, and disorganized speech. The mindset of someone experiencing a psychotic episode may include intense paranoia, such as a belief that they are being watched or persecuted, which would explain the phrase, "they are listening." In this state, Sara may have genuinely believed she was in danger, that she needed to escape, that she couldn't trust anyone. This would explain why she didn't seek help, why she wandered alone to the city center, and why she eventually disappeared. People in a psychotic state sometimes put themselves in dangerous situations without realizing it. They may get lost and have accidents. But this theory has significant problems. Sara had no history of serious mental illness. She had never shown symptoms of psychosis before. While it's true that conditions like schizophrenia typically manifest in early adulthood, there's usually a period of prodromal symptoms, warning signs, that precede the first full-blown psychotic episode. Social isolation, a decline in functioning, and behavioral changes occur gradually over weeks or months. But according to everyone who knew Sara, there was none of that. She was functioning normally until the day she disappeared. The second theory is perhaps the most intriguing, that the messages were not the product of mental confusion, but rather intentional code. Sara was trying to communicate important information in a way that sounded like a mental breakdown to anyone listening, but actually contained meaning that only certain people could decipher. In this interpretation, Sara was perfectly lucid and was making strategic decisions to protect herself or others. This theory suggests that Sara had discovered something, possessed dangerous information, and was trying to pass it on safely. The full extent of what she discovered remains unknown, but the idea is that she used the messages as a double-layer protection. They served the purpose of warning those close to her that something was wrong, but were obscure enough not to reveal details to anyone who might be monitoring her communications. "They are listening" would be the central warning, and the rest would be intentional noise. But here's the problem with this theory. If Sara was intentionally communicating in code, why was there no key to decipher it? Why couldn't family and close friends, people who knew her intimately, find patterns or references that would help them understand the message? And more importantly, what could a 23-year-old college student have discovered that would justify this level of paranoid elaboration? The third theory involves Sara accidentally encountering something dangerous. Perhaps she witnessed a crime, discovered compromising information about someone, or inadvertently became involved in a situation that put her at risk. In this scenario, the mixed messages could be the result of extreme stress and fear. Not exactly a mental health crisis, but not entirely rational either. People under severe traumatic stress sometimes have difficulty communicating clearly. Investigators explored this possibility extensively. They reviewed where Sara had been the weeks before her disappearance, who she had interacted with, and whether there was anything in her routine that could have put her in contact with criminal activity. But they found nothing significant. Sara didn't work in an environment where she would have access to sensitive information. She didn't frequent places associated with crime, and she had no suspicious connections. The fourth theory is that of stalking and harassment that culminated in kidnapping, that someone was fixated on Sara, following her, creating the fear that led to the desperate messages, and that this person eventually confronted her and kidnapped her. The impact of this theory is that it would explain many elements. Sara's nervous behavior on camera, the phrase about they listening, her sudden disappearance. But again, there's no solid evidence of stalking. There were no police reports of Sara complaining of being followed, no threatening messages preserved on her devices, and no one in her life seemed to be obsessing over her. Stalkers often leave digital or behavioral traces. There are warnings, there are patterns. In Sara's case, they found none of these. There's also a fifth theory that's less discussed but can't be completely ruled out: a planned escape. Sara decided to disappear voluntarily and use the confusing messages as a smokescreen, making it appear she had a mental breakdown when in fact she was executing a carefully thought-out escape plan. The decision she made that afternoon, throwing away her cell phone and abandoning her car in a random location, could be consistent with someone trying to cover their tracks. But this theory doesn't hold up well when you consider who Sara was. She had a loving family, a good circle of friends, and was excited about career opportunities. There was no crushing debt, no abusive relationships she needed to escape, and no apparent reason for her to want to start a new life elsewhere. Furthermore, disappearing completely in the modern world requires planning, financial resources, and documentation. There's no evidence that Sara was preparing for this. The hidden truth may be that what happened to Sara is a combination of factors, not a single, simple explanation. Perhaps she had a sudden onset of a neurological condition that affected her speech and judgment, causing her to behave erratically. Perhaps she was truly being stalked by someone who was never identified and who was careful enough to leave no trace. Perhaps there were elements of her life that she kept private, that not even her family and close friends knew about. The journey of trying to understand this case is frustrating precisely because each theory has plausible elements, but none explains everything satisfactorily. It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle where some pieces simply don't exist. You can see the general outline of the image, but the crucial details that would complete the picture are missing. The investigation behind the scenes details show that authorities haven't ruled out any possibilities. The case remains open as a missing person, with elements suggesting both an accidental tragedy and potential crime. They remain receptive to new information and continue to pursue leads as they arise. But after more than a year, the trail is extremely cold. Sara Miller's transformation from articulate college student to unsolved mystery happened in a matter of hours, but the search for answers has lasted over a year without resolution. And every theory, no matter how well-founded, eventually runs into evidence that doesn't add up or questions that can't be answered with the available information. Comment there, nothing makes sense. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because so far we've talked about evidence, theories, investigations, and mysteries. But there's a side to this case that's easy to forget when you're focused on the technical details and the possibilities of what happened. The real people left behind. The family who woke up the day after that Tuesday and realized Sara was never coming back. The lives that were completely transformed by this disappearance. Because behind every unsolved mystery, there's real pain, real loss, and real people trying to move forward without the answers they desperately need. Let's start with Michael and Patricia Miller, Sara's parents. The first time they heard the voicemails their daughter had left was the night she disappeared, when Jessica called to inform them about the strange recordings. Patricia remembers that she and Michael sat together on the living room couch, the phone between them, and pressed play. The emotional impact of that moment was devastating in a way that's difficult to describe for those who haven't experienced it. They heard their daughter's voice, the voice they had known since she was born, the voice they had heard taking her first verbal steps, the voice they had followed through every stage of her life. But the words Sara was saying made no sense. Patricia describes that moment as hearing someone you love drowning before your eyes, but you can't reach them. The voice was there, clear and recognizable, but the connection was broken. It was as if Sara were trying to break through an invisible wall to reach them, but couldn't. And since that day, Michael and Patricia have listened to these messages hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. They listen, searching for clues they might have missed, for patterns they hadn't noticed before, for any fragment of meaning that might lead them to their daughter. Patricia admits that sometimes she wakes up in the middle of the night and plays the messages again, with headphones on, focusing intensely on every syllable, every pause, every breath Sara takes. It's a form of torture she can't stop inflicting on herself because the alternative, giving up trying to understand, feels like abandoning Sara. Michael had a different but equally painful journey. He became obsessed with the idea that messages were code he should be able to decipher. He studied cryptography, linguistics, even computer programming, trying to find tools that could reveal the hidden meaning. He created complex spreadsheets mapping every word in the messages, looking for frequency patterns, trying different decoding systems. But nothing worked, and each failed attempt was another blow to his hope. The mindset of parents who have lost a child without explanation is something that defies description. It's not like normal grief, where you're certain of what happened and can begin to process the loss. It's a kind of emotional limbo, where you constantly oscillate between hope and despair. There are days when Patricia wakes up absolutely certain that Sara is alive somewhere and will return. And there are days when the weight of probability crushes her, and she allows herself to consider the possibility that Sara is dead. The behind-the-scenes look at their lives in the months since the disappearance reveals a complete transformation. Michael had to take time off work because he couldn't concentrate. Patricia stopped cooking the meals she usually made because so many of them were Sara's favorites, and preparing food that Sara isn't there to eat feels like self-inflicted cruelty. They've converted Sara's room into a sort of command center, with city maps, timelines written on walls, and copies of every police report. And then there's Emily, Sara's younger sister. She was 17 when Sara disappeared, a senior in high school. Sara wasn't just her older sister. She was her best friend, her confidant, the person Emily admired most in the world. The decisions Emily had to make about how to move forward with her life, while Sara was missing, were agonizing. Emily felt guilty for doing normal teenage things. Going to school felt wrong when Sara was missing. Laughing with friends felt like betrayal. Thinking about her own future, about college, about plans, felt selfish when Sara's future was so uncertain. She developed what psychologists call survivor's guilt, that irrational but powerful feeling that she doesn't deserve to be okay while Sara is gone. Emily also carries more specific guilt. She remembers that the week before her disappearance, Sara had called one to talk about something that was kind of stressful, but Emily was busy with exams and asked Sara to call back later. That conversation never happened. And now Emily is tormented by the question, if she had stopped to listen, if she had paid attention when Sara needed it, would things have been different? Was Sara trying to call for help, and Emily lost the signal? Rationally, everyone around Emily tells her it's not her fault, that there was no way she could have known, that she probably wouldn't have changed anything. But guilt doesn't operate on a rational level. It operates in the heart, in the emotions, in the what-ifs that haunt you at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. Sara's friends, Jessica, Amanda, and Claire, carry their own burdens. Jessica blames herself for not understanding the messages immediately, for thinking they were joking in the first few minutes. Amanda blames herself for not noticing anything unusual during lunch, for not asking more questions, for letting Sara leave with a simple, "See you later." Claire, who wasn't with Sara that day, blames herself for not being there, for not being a friend who might have made a difference. The impact on their friendship dynamic was profound. They still see each other, still support each other, but there's a permanent shadow over every encounter. Sara should be there. There's always a metaphorical empty chair at the table. And there's tension, too, because each of them processes the trauma differently. Jessica wants to talk about Sara constantly, to keep the memory alive. Claire needs emotional distance to function. These differences create friction that didn't exist before. The revelation of how this disappearance affects increasingly wider circles is haunting. It's not just her immediate family who suffers. It's Sara's professors who wonder if they've missed signs. It's her roommates who revisit every interaction from the last week, searching for clues. It's the entire university community that now views disappearances differently, with a new and uncomfortable awareness of how easily someone can simply vanish. Patricia founded a support group for families of missing persons in the region. She discovered that dozens of families are living in the same limbo, waiting for answers that may never come. The group meets monthly, and Patricia says it's the only place where she feels she can be completely honest about what she's feeling without people trying to fixate or minimize her pain. Michael channeled his energy differently. He became an activist for changes in missing persons policies, pushing for faster investigation protocols, more resources dedicated to unsolved cases, and better coordination between jurisdictions. It's his way of transforming tragedy into something that can help others. It's also, though he won't readily admit it, a way to avoid being stuck in his thoughts, in the fear of what might have happened to Sara. The hidden truth is that the whole family is in survival mode, just trying to get through one day at a time. Important dates are particularly brutal. Sara's birthday passed 6 months after her disappearance, and the family didn't know how to acknowledge it. Celebrating seemed inappropriate when Sara wasn't there. Ignoring it seemed cruel. They ended up having a small family dinner, with a candle lit for Sara's empty seat, and everyone cried more than they ate. The holidays are equally difficult. The first Christmas without Sara was devastating. The Miller household had always been full of Christmas traditions, but doing everything the same without Sara seemed impossible. Doing everything differently felt like admitting she wouldn't return. They found themselves in an uneasy middle ground, maintaining some traditions but lacking any real joy, just going through the motions because they didn't know what else to do. Emily is now in college, having decided to defer just one semester before pursuing her plans. She chose the same university Sara was attending, which many thought would be emotionally difficult. But Emily wanted to be close to where Sara was, walking the same halls, perhaps finding some connection or answer that others had missed. It's her way of keeping Sara present in her daily life. Right there, they deserve peace. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. Because even after all this time, even with all the pain the family has experienced and continues to experience, Sara Miller's case remains officially unsolved. And that means there's still movement. There are still people working behind the scenes trying to find answers. There are still developments that keep the investigation technically active, even if the trail is extremely cold. And each small step forward, each new analysis, each possible clue, brings with it a cruel renewal hope, often followed by further disappointment. In recent months, there's been a renewed effort to analyze voice messages using artificial intelligence technology, A company specializing in natural language processing offered services free of charge to the family, promising to apply advanced algorithms that could identify patterns that human analysis had missed. The transformation in how these messages can be analyzed has been significant with the advancement of AI technology, and there was genuine hope that perhaps, finally, these tools could reveal something. The algorithms were trained to look for multiple things: words or phrases hidden amidst the apparent noise, rhythmic patterns in speech that could indicate code, even emotional analysis of Sara's voice to more accurately determine her mental state. The initial impact of the results was intriguing. The AI identified what appeared to be repetitive structure in some of the messages, certain intonation patterns that repeated themselves, suggesting that it might not be completely random. But when human experts reviewed these AI findings, the consensus was that the patterns identified were too subtle and ambiguous to be definitive. It could be Sara unconsciously repeating structures, or it could simply be the algorithm finding patterns where none existed, a phenomenon known in data analysis as overfitting. The hidden truth is that even the most advanced artificial intelligence cannot create meaning where none may exist. There were also developments related to a possible Sara sighting. About 3 months ago, a woman in a town approximately 250 kilometers away contacted police, saying she had seen someone who looked very much like Sara working at a local restaurant. The description was convincing enough that investigators drove there to investigate. The family spent days in an agonizing limbo between hope and fear, waiting for confirmation. But when police finally located the woman the witness had seen, it wasn't Sara. It was someone with a similar appearance, but definitely someone else. Patricia describes these false alarms as particularly cruel because each one forces you to relive the initial trauma of the disappearance. You're thrown back into that state of desperate hope, only to be crushed again when it turns out to be another dead end. Police decisions about which lines of investigation to pursue changed over time as some avenues proved fruitless. Initially, significant resources were dedicated to the case, with several detectives working on different angles. But as months passed without progress, and as new urgent cases emerged, resources were reallocated. Sara's case is now technically open, but there is no active daily investigation. It is revisited periodically, especially when new leads emerge or new technology becomes available. The investigator's mindset has also evolved. The lead detective originally assigned to the case, a man named Detective Mark Stevens, admits that he was initially convinced it was a mental health crisis that would be resolved relatively quickly. He expected to find Sara in a psychiatric hospital or homeless shelter, confused but alive. As that expectation proved incorrect, his approach changed. He now treats it as a missing person under suspicious circumstances, not ruling out the possibility of foul play. There was also an interesting development related to financial records. Approximately 8 months after her disappearance, a transaction was made on Sara's credit card. It was a small purchase, less than $20, at a convenience store in a coastal town 4 hours away. The revelation of this transaction generated immediate excitement, and a new round of investigation focused on that area. Investigators traveled there, reviewed the store's security cameras, and interviewed employees. The cameras showed someone using the card, but the image quality was poor, and the person was wearing a hat and sunglasses, making definitive identification impossible. The physical image was consistent with Sara, but also consistent with thousands of other young women. The store employee didn't specifically recall that transaction among the hundreds he processed daily. The card was never used again after that single transaction. The family doesn't know what to make of this information. Does it mean Sara was alive 8 months ago? Or does it mean someone found or stole her card and used it? Is the transaction genuinely linked to the disappearance? Or is it a cruel coincidence? Someone completely unrelated who somehow obtained the card number? Behind the scenes of the investigation, there is also growing frustration with jurisdictional limitations. Because Sara disappeared in one city, her cell phone was found in another, her car was in a third location, and the alleged card transaction occurred in a fourth. Multiple police jurisdictions are technically involved. And while there's cooperation, there are also gaps in communication, different priorities, and varying levels of available resources. The family organized several additional community searches over the months. The most recent was just 6 weeks ago, focusing on a wooded area near where Sara's car was found. Volunteers spent days combing the vegetation, looking for anything that might be related to Sara. They found a few items that initially seemed promising, but subsequent analysis showed that none were connected to the case. Michael also began working with a private investigator, using family savings to hire someone who could devote more time and attention to the case than the overwhelmed police force could. The investigator, a woman named Diana Torres, with decades of experience in missing persons cases, brought a fresh perspective. She's revisiting witnesses, asking questions that weren't asked in the initial investigation, exploring angles that were overlooked. Diana has her own theory, which she is discreetly investigating. She believes the messages may not be code nor the product of a mental health crisis, but rather the result of some kind of involuntary intoxication. She is exploring the possibility that Sara may have been drugged with a substance that causes severe confusion and speech impairment, such as scopolamine or other drugs that affect cognition and memory. If true, it would completely change the nature of the case from a personal tragedy to an intentional crime. But proving this theory is nearly impossible at this point. There are no blood or urine samples from Sara from that afternoon, and there's no way to retroactively test for substances that would have left her system within hours or days. It's informed speculation, but still speculation. The family's quest to keep the case in the public eye continues. Patricia maintains an active social media page dedicated to Sara, posting regularly, sharing updates, and keeping thousands of followers engaged with the case. Each anniversary of the disappearance generates a new wave of media attention, which the family hopes will finally yield a clue that leads to answers. Emily started a podcast about her sister's case. It's her way of processing the trauma, while also keeping Sara's story alive. She interviews investigators, missing persons case specialists, and even other families going through similar situations. It's emotional, it's difficult, but it's also her way of doing something proactive, instead of just passively waiting for answers that may never come. Sara Miller's case is officially listed as an unsolved disappearance. There is insufficient evidence to declare her presumed dead. There is no body, no confession, no conclusion of any kind. Sara now exists in a legal and existential limbo, neither clearly alive nor definitely dead, simply absent. And this absence continues to echo through every life she touched. Comment there. Never give up on her. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because when you really stop to think about everything that happened to Sara Miller, when you absorb the magnitude of this mystery, you realize that this case represents something deeply disturbing about the nature of human communication and how fragile our connection to one another is. Sara left messages that should explain everything. She tried to communicate, leaving her voice recorded, preserved, available for endless analysis. But instead of bringing clarity, these messages only deepen the mystery. Sara's last words exist. They can be heard as many times as you like. You can study them, dissect them, go through every second of audio with meticulous attention, but no one can understand them. And this incomprehensibility is, in a way, more haunting than if Sara had simply disappeared silently, because you can fill silence with possibilities. But these messages exist as concrete evidence that something was terribly wrong, without revealing what that something was. The transformation from clear to incomprehensible communication, which occurred within hours in Sara's life, forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Was she trying to protect us with code? Did Sara possess such dangerous information that she needed to obscure it, making her words unintelligible to anyone except specific recipients who will hold the key to decipher them? In this interpretation, the messages were an act of desperate courage, an attempt to warn the people she loved without putting them, or herself, in greater danger. But if it was a code, it was a code no one could break. Not family who knew her intimately, not friends who shared stories and references with her, not professional experts in cryptography and linguistics. If Sara created a code, she took the key with her when she disappeared. And this raises a painful question. What purpose of code can be broken? Is it communication or just sophisticated noise? Or was Sara crying out for help in a way we'll never learn to decipher? Perhaps she was under the influence of something, be it a neurological crisis, a chemical substance, or extreme psychological terror, that compromised her ability to form coherent language, but left her desperate urge to communicate intact. In this darker interpretation, the messages are frustrated attempts to call for help, screams stifled by whatever process was affecting her mind. The impact of considering this possibility is devastating, because it means Sara was conscious enough to know she was in danger, lucid enough to try to reach help, but already too compromised to convey the message clearly. It's like watching someone sinking in quicksand in slow motion, watching them try to scream, but the sound comes out distorted and unintelligible, and you can't help but watch. The hidden truth may be that we will never know which of these interpretations is correct. And perhaps it is precisely this enduring uncertainty that makes Sara Miller's case so haunting. It's not just about a missing person. It's about the complete breakdown of communication at the moment when it was most needed. It's about the fragility of language, this tool we constantly use without thinking, and how it can fail spectacularly when we need it most. The decisions everyone around Sara made that day and in the days that followed were based on interpretations of the messages that may have been completely wrong. If they had understood what Sara was trying to say, could they have acted differently? Could they have gone to different places, looked for different things, engaged authorities more quickly in more specific ways? Or were the messages genuinely incomprehensible by design, and there was no way they could have done better? The journey of trying to understand these messages has, in a way, become the story itself. The mystery of the lost words is as central to the case as Sara's physical disappearance. And this speaks volumes about our relationship with language and meaning. We, as human beings, are fundamentally communicative creatures. We use words to construct realities, to share experiences, to connect with one another across the chasm of individual consciousness. But what happens when words fail? When the connection is broken not for lack of trying, but by some fundamental barrier between intention and expression? Sara's messages exist in this liminal space between communication and silence, between meaning and nonsense. They are evidence of an effort to communicate, but they fail to accomplish the basic function of communication, which is to convey comprehensible meaning. The mindset of anyone who hears these messages is inevitably marked by them. You can't help but try to find patterns, to impose meaning, to connect the seemingly random fragments into something coherent. It's human instinct to seek order in chaos, meaning in the seemingly meaningless. But Sara's messages resist all such attempts, remaining opaque no matter how many times you revisit them. And perhaps there's something deeply human, too, in the family's refusal to give up trying to understand. Patricia and Michael still listen to the messages regularly, still searching for clues. Emily still analyzes every word on her podcast, inviting experts to offer new perspectives. They can't let go because letting go would feel like abandoning Sara, admitting defeat in the last form connection they have with her. The revelations emerging from studying this case go beyond the specific details of Sara's disappearance. They tell us something about the nature of unresolved loss, about how we live with mysteries that defy resolution. They expose the fragility of our sense of security, how quickly the familiar can become strange. The normal can transform into the inexplicable. Sara Miller became more than just a missing person. She became a symbol of all those cases where communication fails at the most critical moment, where words exist but meaning is lost, where evidence is abundant but understanding remains elusive. Her messages resonate not only in the memories of those who knew her, but in anyone who has ever struggled to express something important, who has felt the chasm between what they want to say and what they can communicate. And while we remain without definitive answers, while the messages remain indecipherable, Sara now exists in that space between presence and absence. She left word behind, but words cannot bring her back. They cannot explain what happened. They cannot provide closure. They cannot answer the questions that haunt everyone who knows the story. Sara's transformation from articulate student to incomprehensible voice and then complete absence happened in a matter of hours. But the ripples of that event continue to expand more than a year later. Every person who hears about the case is forced to confront the same impossible questions. What would you do if you received incomprehensible messages from someone you love? How would you interpret words that seem urgent but convey no clear meaning? How would you live with the constant uncertainty of never knowing what really happened? Sara Miller's messages exist as disturbing artifacts, voice recordings that should be transparent but are opaque, that should solve a mystery but only deepen it. They are reminders that not every story has a satisfactory explanation, that some questions have no answers, that reality is sometimes far stranger and more tragic than any fiction could ever imagine. Right there, the words disappeared with her. So, you made it to the end. That means the story touched you in some way, that the mystery of Sara Miller intrigued you as much as it intrigues me. And look, if you felt this connection, if you were absorbed by this case that defies explanation, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Every day I bring you real stories like this, cases that make you question, reflect, and that treat missing people with the humanity and seriousness they deserve. It's the kind of content that goes beyond sensationalism and truly delves into the mystery and the human pain behind it. And if you've truly stuck with me this far on this journey, leave a comment saying, "I'm listening." I read every comment. And that interaction is what makes this space more than just videos. It's what creates a community of people who care about these unsolved cases. Please leave a like, too, because it helps this video reach more people who also want to know Sara Miller's story, who also want to ensure that cases like this are not forgotten. Every like makes a real difference. And look, there's a video here about the case of a student. Another disappearance with cryptic messages that no one has been able to fully decipher to this day. Click there and stay with me, because the story will leave you with even more questions. Or check out our playlist of mysterious disappearances. Thanks for your company, and until the next mystery.